Okay, the stream is live.
Namaskar, a very good evening and welcome to today's show. I am Raja Munib, your host, and today I have with me a prolific writer and somebody who's a current affairs keen watcher on current affairs and global issues with us. We are going to discuss the elections in Bangladesh, its ramifications on Indian politics, as well as the backsliding of democracy, what is being called in Bangladesh by the Western countries. So, with me is a very prolific writer, Sagarika Sinha. Welcome, Sagarika, to the show.
Thank you for having me on, Manip. I think we were also going to talk about the arrest of Mohammed Yunus by
Yes,
Sheikh
and
Hasina.
that will be a part of our conversation. But you know where I want to begin? I want to begin, Sagarika, that 2024 is a very, very significant year in terms of politics, and you know it's throughout the world. If you look at elections which are happening in India, which are happening in Pakistan, Bangladesh, United States, and then you have UK elections. But it's the Asian elections which have, caught the imagination, I would say, of the press by and large, the Western media, if we talk about, because if we see how Western media has been continuously talking about elections, whether it is in India or whether it is in Bangladesh, we have not seen that kind of an interest in Pakistan vis-a-vis the Western media. They're not commenting too much about their elections, but that's a discussion for another day. I want to talk about what do you see from 7th of January, the elections are scheduled in Bangladesh. How do you see these elections and where do you see, why do you see that there is so much of focus of the Western media on, the elections of Bangladesh, and why are they so much interested into what is happening in Bangladesh, especially in Bangladesh?
So thank you, Manip. In terms of the Western media suddenly being focused on Asian elections, we're a very large population for one, and we're suddenly more geopolitically necessary. We're not pawns on their chessboard and not behaving like that, and thus the Indian subcontinent has come into focus. And what is happening is that Bangladesh has been it's under Sheikh Hasina, it has been a friend to India that is heavily dependent on China as well. It's again, as considering its geopolitical existence, it's an understandable situation. Sheikh Hasina has done much to help the economy of the country, but they're a small nation that has its own challenges when it comes to so many things in terms of administration, and thus trade can only go so far. Their largest trading partner remains China, and so in that tussle between whether how involved China can get, it forms a very important piece of the chessboard on and is of strategic importance. Now, what is happening is not hearsay. The Prime Minister of Bangladesh herself, Sheikh Hasina, has mentioned that the US is likely interested in regime change. That's a major statement, right, coming from the Prime Minister of the country, and they host their ambassadors. This is not close to election. Several months ago, Antony Blinken made the statement that Bangladeshi officials would face visa restrictions if they participated in, not ensuring free and fair elections. That's just like a lot of maybe could be, and essentially it was bullying, but because it's important, it's very necessary for Bangladeshi officials to be traveling between countries. That's what people in government do. And so to restrict their visas and sort of blacklist them, name them, shame them, it's a major step. It's I've noticed that there's this pattern that whenever, वैसे हम लोग ये ना हिंदी में ये
So we can,
conversation होने वाली थी,
we can have a
but
conversation in Hindi, English, comfortable, whatever.
अच्छा सो बात ये थी कि बहुत बार ऐसा होता है कि जब ये रेजीम चेंज ऑपरेशन शुरू करने वाले होते हैं ना, सबसे पहला आम होता है, ठीक है, ऑन ग्राउंड वर्कर्स आपके प्रोटेस्ट जारी किए हैं, बहुत सक्सेसफुल हुए नहीं है क्योंकि अनलाइक इंडिया, most nations most democracies, including Canada, they don't take um, um, protests quite so lightly. They crack down, and it's not a crackdown on necessarily. If you're blocking citizen traffic, if you're violating rules of the road, if you're creating a nuisance, if you're violent, क्रैकडाउन्स आर वेरी नॉर्मल. तो अब जो ऑपोजिशन लिंक्ड पॉलिटिकली ड्रिवन प्रोटेस्ट हो रहे थे, जो यूएस उसको सपोर्ट कर रहा था, आप देखेंगे जितना भी खबर छपा है ना, इट्स इन फेवर ऑफ द प्रोटेस्ट. कोई गवर्नमेंट के अगेंस्ट अगर प्रोटेस्ट कर रहा है, आप उसका फेवर कर रहे हो एज एन अपेरेंट अनबायस्ड वो, तो आप सोच लीजिए कि उसमें एजेंडा है. आप रिपोर्ट कर सकते हैं कि प्रोटेस्ट हो रहे हैं, ये वजह बताई गई है, बट ऐसा नहीं होता. उसमें जो कॉनोटेशन है, उसमें जो टोनालिटी है, वो हमेशा ऐसा दिखाती है कि वो बहुत जायज प्रोटेस्ट है, ऐसा नहीं कि वो पॉलिटिकली ड्रिवन या ऑपोजिशन को हेल्प करता हुआ प्रोटेस्ट है. ठीक इंडिया में जैसा होता है. तो मैंने देखा है कि जब वो चेंज करने की स्थिति वो बना रहे होते हैं ना, तो खूब ज्यादा उसको इन फोकस लाते हैं कि जो उनकी ऑडियंस है, और उनकी ऑडियंस बांग्लादेश में नहीं है, उनकी ऑडियंस इंडिया में नहीं है, उनकी ऑडियंस वहीं पे है जहाँ पे उन मतलब यूएस में है, राइट. तो अपने ऑडियंसेस के लिए ये शुरू कर देते कि नाउ यू मस्ट फोकस ऑन दिस small impoverished nation of Bangladesh that is of course ruled by an autocratic despot who is cracking down violently, and वो सब शुरू हो जाता है उनका ना. मतलब सारे डेमोक्रेसीज जहाँ पे इलेक्शन होते हैं उसमें वो ऑटोक्रेसी बता देते हैं. जहाँ पे मतलब सऊदी अरेबिया को बोलने की हिम्मत नहीं है, कतार को बोलने की हिम्मत नहीं है, पर इन लोग को बोल देते हैं. आसिम मुनीर को तो होस्ट करते हैं. तो my article for NDTV was about US double standards when it comes to Pakistan and Bangladesh. Now, one is a functional democracy. It is acting, it is trying really hard to move away from the apparent elimination of the US state, which is China. It's a rival nation, let's call it a rival nation, which is posing a threat. It has done a lot under this government. And we know that an opposition government will kind of go the opposite direction, right? So it's not a benefit to the US. US कई बार ऐसे करता है. वो देखिए $10 billion फंडिंग जो तालिबान के हाथ में गई थी वाया पाकिस्तान, जो तालिबान को बंद करने के लिए आया, बट गया उसको और स्ट्रेंथन करने में और मजबूत करने में. तो वो होता है
थोड़ा कि जब यूएस ने बाइडेन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन ने कहा था शेख हसीना को कि आप ऑपोजिशन को ऑन बोर्ड लीजिए और उनके साथ डायलॉग कीजिए, सो शी हैड अ वेरी very I would say she gave a very smart kickback saying that कि आप डोनाल्ड ट्रम्प के साथ बात करनी शुरू कीजिए. तो मैं अपने ऑपोजिशन के साथ बात करूंगी. सो आई थिंक वो भी एक रीजन जो है सागरिका, हम देख रहे हैं कि Asian countries now are standing up to the United States and they understand कि इनकी गेम क्या है और ये क्या चाहते हैं और अपने एडवांटेज के लिए ये कैसे यूज करते हैं पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज को, या कैसे पावर सबवर्जन करते हैं. बट अगर हम बांग्लादेश को वैसे भी देखें, सिंस इफ यू रिमेंबर 2006-2008 में शेख हसीना वाज बिहाइंड द बार्स, शो वाज खालिदा जिया बिहाइंड द बार्स, क्योंकि उन्होंने जो है वो पावर वो इंटरिम गवर्नमेंट को दे दी, जैसे पाकिस्तान में होता है. आज की डेट में खक्कर साहब बैठे हैं पावर में इलेक्शन करवाने के लिए और अभी तक इलेक्शन हो नहीं रहे, राइट, और बहुत से इश्यूज हो रहे हैं वहां पर. बट अगर हम ऑपोजिशन की बात करते हैं, जब से शेख हसीना पावर में आई है, कहीं ना कहीं क्रिटिक्स का ये कहना है कि शी इज वेरी हार्ड ऑन आवर ऑपोजिशन. शी कीप्स देम, she will make cases against them, she'll put them behind bars. अभी recently अगर हम देखें मोहम्मद यूनुस जो इकलौते नोबेल प्राइज peace prize winner हैं from Bangladesh, he had to be gone to jail. He's about 82 years old, and he's a man जिसने we can say that who started the revolution of economic up mobility in Bangladesh by providing loans to entrepreneurs, bringing the Grameen Bank in, putting the potential of Bangladeshi economy out to the world. So kahin na kahin, when you see a treatment of that kind of a person, what is happening? Do you think that assessment is fair कि नहीं बांग्लादेश में जो ruling party है, they have more powers than a democratic party? They act more authoritatively rather than more democratically. Do you see that as a reason as well?
see, what I see as a reason is that, let me just share. Sorry, let me just share this. Is this visible?
No, I can't see it.
I am sharing my window. I think someone has to allow it to be shared, but that's okay. Actually, I'll
Hmm.
stop sharing it now. So there's a few things. Okay, Muhammad Yunus is a Nobel Prize winner. Nobel Prize winners, Magsaysay Award winners. He's won a ton of awards, विदेशी awards. बांग्लादेश में नहीं जीते हैं. अब जब हम लोग को पता चल गई है ना WEF और all the globalist organizations की थोड़ी सच्चाई बाहर आ रही है, I don't think we need to put everybody on a pedestal. He has been accused of tax fraud. Has he fought it? A court has ruled that it is proven. Is he above the
Hmm.
law because he won a Swedish award?
Hmm.
Is that the thing? Is that the case that, because that is the case that is being made by his lobby, is that he is above the law? मतलब इन पर जितने कानून हैं वो जो न्याय है उनके विक्टिम्स को नहीं मिलना. और इनके विक्टिम्स कौन होंगे? किनके साथ काम करता है? ग्रामीण बैंक काम करता है जो गांव की सबसे गरीब महिलाएं हैं, जो सबसे दरिद्र लोग हैं, उनको सहायता करने के नाम पे, उनकी सहायता करने के नाम पे वो उनसे यू नो ठीक है, टैक्स फ्रॉड एक चीज है, बट उन पे एक्यूजेशंस ये भी है कि वो प्रॉफिटियरिंग कर रहे हैं माइक्रो क्रेडिट के नाम पे. तो should a person just not be investigated because उनको किसी ने अवार्ड दिया है? मुझे ये समझ नहीं आ रहा. लाइक द आउटक्राई अराउंड दिस इज कंप्लीटली बेस्ड ऑन दिस. 2010 में, आज की बात नहीं है, 2010 में थॉमस हाइनमैन was an investigative journalist, Norway based, जिन्होंने कॉटन द डेट, कॉटन द माइक्रो फाइनेंस, क्या नाम था, एक ना डॉक्यूमेंट्री बनाई थी, कॉटन माइक्रो डेट, क्योंकि वो माइक्रो फाइनेंस करते हैं, कॉटन माइक्रो डेट एक डॉक्यूमेंट्री बनाई है. He was instrumental in the pardafash of Muhammad Yunus, of what Grameen Bank is doing. You want to know what Muhammad Yunus has himself said? He has written that sorry, just give me a second. He has written about it himself that, I don't want to be this cash flow structure, it was just changed to generate income for the borrowers of the bank. See, borrowers of the bank will not get an income. This sentence itself, from anybody with basic understanding of finance, makes no sense. To generate income from the borrowers of the bank and offer opportunities to diversify our efforts for poverty reduction. तो हम स्कैम करके पॉवर्टी रिड्यूस करेंगे, उनका लिखा हुआ है. मतलब आप बताइए, ऐसे चीजों को हम मतलब ये मोहम्मद यूनुस ने लिखा है,
वही कह
अंग्रेजी
रहा
में
हूँ कि दिस
सुनने में अच्छा लग रहा है.
ये दिस इज द चार्ज अगेंस्ट द बांग्लादेशी करंट गवर्नमेंट. शेख हसीना की नोबेल प्राइज विनर है और उसने बड़ा कुछ काम किया है,
ये
ग्रामीण
लिखा
बैंक
है कि
किया है.
हम टैक्स अवॉइड कर रहे हैं, पैसे बनाने के लिए टैक्स अवॉइड कर रहे हैं, आप हमें कुछ ना बोल.
बट जहां
और
तक
हम
ऑपोजिशन,
ये जो वो है ना, क्या बोलते हैं, ये डॉक्यूमेंट्री इन्वेस्टिगेशन है ना, बंद करने की कोशिश कर रही थी. इनका जो, और आप बताइए, इनके सपोर्ट में सिर्फ बाहर से नोबेल प्राइज विनर्स और ये और वो आ. जब अन्ना हजारे ने मूवमेंट शुरू किया तो गांव से आए थे ना, उनके पीछे कितने गांववासी आए थे. जब आंदोलन शुरू किया था उन्होंने, गांववासी उनका सपोर्ट किए थे और उनको आगे बढ़ाए थे. इनके लिए तो कोई नहीं आ रहा. इतने इतने हजारों महिलाओं की मदद करी है ना उन्होंने अपेरेंटली.
हाँ, और he couldn't even launch a political party. He thought कि इनको नहीं मिलेगा
His
political party
interests
में.
are
He
not
tried to
in
launch.
Bangladesh, right? This man has been in the US. He's got a lot of Norwegian ties. His co-founders of the Grameen Bank are not Bangladeshi. So his interests do not lie solely in Bangladesh. Any leader who cares about her own citizens is completely within her rights to protect her citizens from whoever his interests lie with. It is not with Bangladesh. If, right, there is a, if he keeps whatever in Bangladesh, and ऐसा नहीं है कि आप NRI होकर या NRB होकर कुछ ऐसा नहीं रख सकते हैं, कोई interest नहीं रख सकते हैं. If you want to help the country, do it. But that does not mean you can be above the law, right? यही हुआ था जब BBC के BBC was evading tax in India. अब लोग कह रहे थे कि उनको उनके खिलाफ कोई एजेंडा है क्या. अरे जब उन्होंने खुद ने कहा, BBC themselves accepted it, right? They changed, they shut down some stuff. So वो बोल रहे थे कि डॉक्यूमेंट्री बनाया इसलिए, ये बोल रहे हैं कि पॉलिटिकल पार्टी बनाया. सब कुछ अगर रिवेंज में भी हो, आप कह रहे हैं कि इनको रिवेंज अलाउ होना चाहिए क्योंकि विदेशियों ने इनको क्रेडिबिलिटी दी है अवार्ड के नाम पे. पर ये जो भी करे आपको ऐसे लेना चाहिए. Like whatever they do is valid. Any retaliation is invalid, regardless of the charges or anything.
Isn't that a textbook from, if we see चाहे हम इंडिया में देखें, we have these NGOs and these basically operating in the same manner, then crying horse जब उनकी funding बंद हो गई, या a section of media, I'll take News Laundry's example into that कि, और BBC का जब anytime a government takes action within law, the Western media cries horse.
Correct.
They start crying foul, right? But at the same time, the same Western media doesn't appreciate the rule of law a democratic country is trying to follow. So don't you think यहाँ पर कहीं पे dichotomy है दोनों के the choice of their words and the choice of their backing of how a country should run, being a democratic country should run itself and be a robust law-abiding democratic country. Don't you see there is a dichotomy there?
I don't say it is a dichotomy. What I see is exactly the dialogue that you mentioned of Sheikh Hasina, right? Where she just says that, why don't you sit down with Trump and discuss your issues across the table, and then we'll talk about what I need to do. See, whether it is the US, whether it is any other white nation, one must remember that subcontinent nations have been colonized until incredibly recently on a historical scale. Our colonization remains in living memory. तो वो जो किसी को भी अगर देश के प्रति थोड़ा भी प्रेम है ना, वो आग बबूला खुद ही हो जाते हैं अगर कोई आके बोले कि हम बताते हैं तुम्हें क्या करना है. That is not the way of a fellow democracy. You are not
So
the watchdog for
1947 moment where they want to dictate every post colony of British to run the way they want them to be run, rather than see them grow robustly on their own.
हम तो एकदम दृढ़ निश्चय लेकर रशिया से ऑयल लिए जा रहे हैं, वेनेजुएला से ऑयल लेंगे, सब कुछ करेंगे, ठीक है, हमारे सिटीजन्स के लिए जो भी करना है हम देख लेंगे. अब बांग्लादेश की frankly वो स्टैंडिंग नहीं है because it's a troubled nation in many ways, right? It's geopolitically, the significance, what can be achieved in the population, in terms of economy, is not definitely nothing like India. It offers a great growth story because the economy has done well, but they've had some benefits being a least developed country ke bracket mein aate the. Ab, they don't want to get out of the bracket because of the tariff benefits that they were getting and all of those things. The thing is that they are not that strong and they need that support, but nobody can go and tell कि आप ऐसे देश को चलाओ. अब इंडिया पर थोड़ा सा निर्भर होंगे अगर ट्रेड के लिए हम पैक्ट्स बनाए, हम Sheikh Hasina will send mangoes to Mamata Banerjee and all of those things. The thing is that there is a prevalence of civil society and all the information they take in, and it's not very India friendly. It's not very non-radical. It is pretty radical. It's very Islamist. It's very anti-India also, despite the fact that India was what gave them independence, right? They do want to wipe out their history, and that's something that really makes. This is not the government, by the way. This is a lot of what has happened to civil society over some time. This creates a tinderbox, right? Another one. at our borders. The situation is not that dire. I'm just saying that there are risks because वहाँ से बहुत सारा illegal immigration यहाँ पे होता ही है. हमें पता ही है borders कितने porous है and how much corruption there is, etc. The situation cannot be stoked. Once it is stoked by the US, it poses a huge risk for us as well. It is very natural for India to be concerned, and India has cautioned the USA over, several times over earlier this year. They've been asking Bangladesh to accommodate opposition positions, right? कि यार opposition में इसलिए है क्योंकि majority ने उनको vote नहीं किया, right? It is against the citizens'
Opposition
wishes.
का एक प्रॉब्लम है ना बांग्लादेश का. बांग्लादेश की जो ऑपोजिशन है, जो मेजर बीएनपी है, इट इज नॉट अ वर्किंग ऑपोजिशन.
करने
इट
में
इज
काम आती है, कोई इंजीनियर रेजिम चेंज करने में काम आती है, तो उनकी वो सुविधा
so
है यूएस.
leadership is outside Bangladesh. They don't really connect with the people in Bangladesh. Right? They're not a working opposition.
Sorry,
The
इसमें
only
मुझे
working
बताना है कि आप जो बोले हैं ना कि opposition बाहर बैठता है. That's why my NDTV article was cited by a Harvard student, I think she was, who was a supporter of BNP, saying कि अच्छा ये, which I'm kind of dissing it, but there's all of the elite positions are from out of the country. They have very little connection around.
Who is the main opposition of Bangladesh in of Awami League in Bangladesh? It is essentially the Jamaat-e-Islami, which basically is bad. But they have a political party called Bangladesh Development Party, BDP, जिसको बोलते हैं, and that is the far right opposition, which is on the ground, working on the ground, right? So अगर हम बांग्लादेश को देखें, whether it is Awami League or whether it is the far right, yes, the far right is going to be more detrimental for India. But Sheikh Hasina herself has not been a very good news for India as a prime minister herself. Why I say that is because of two reasons. One, if you look at the persecution of the minorities which has happened in Bangladesh over the years, the land grab, they have been driven out of their homes, their businesses have been taken over. There have been instances of rape, of atrocities. On the other hand, शेख हसीना ने बड़ी स्मार्टली पुश किया है जो भी रोहिंग्या का प्रेशर बांग्लादेश में आता है, that pressure gets pushed towards the Indian borders. And हमारी सबसे बड़ी आज की ये प्रॉब्लम है जो illegal Rohingyas within our boundaries and who are living in India pose a considerable security threat to us as well. Third is the narcotics, which gets peddled via the Rohingyas through the Bangladesh border, and then we have issues on our northeast, which essentially in Assam or and those areas. So we have multi-pronged security issues, which I don't think even Awami League has been very serious about, approaching those things from an iron hand thing. Civil society का radicalize होना एक चीज होता है, but then if you have a strong law and order, कम से कम you keep your civil society in some control. But मुझे ये लगता है कि she has a tacit approval of a civil society कि she blames on the far right, but she closes her eyes when something like that happens and let that happen because she thinks that if she takes action then she'll lose the popular Islamist support or the vote bank, which is very very crucial for Awami League. आपको क्या लगता है?
I think you've laid out all of the problems very very well. Okay, मतलब इसमें एक भी चीज नहीं है जिसको factually कोई deny कर सकता है. बात यह है कि alternative क्या है, choice क्या है? चॉइस हमारे पास यही है कि शेख हसीना एक स्टेबल गवर्नमेंट बना के रखेगी कि रोहिंग्यास का कुछ तो मतलब हम लोग थोड़ा आराम भरोसा छोड़ सकते हैं कि एकदम the migration can be controlled if we strengthen our law and order situation internally, then root out corruption from that region, and look, that's on us as well. If we wanted our borders to be stronger, our borders would be stronger. Now we don't want to risk a lot of, say, shooting and all of that at the border, at the Bangladeshi border, right? We don't want to do that. However, there's many ways to control it, which was being, we need to strengthen that from our end, which I'm not going to blame solely on them. Now, with regards to Sheikh Hasina, you're right that she offers some sort of approval to allow for these things to happen. But look, हम अब थोड़ा ज़्यादा एक्सपेक्टेशन रखने लग गए हैं कोई गवर्नमेंट से। पहले तो आप थोड़े कुछ साल पहले की
नहीं
बात सोचें तो एक
हाँ
एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन एक ना ये तो होना ही है वाले भाव जो हर चीज़ में परमेट करती थी कि इतना तो होगा ही, है ना? तो
हम्म,
most countries do not have that tough a stand on systemic issues and ये issue systemic है। जब Islam is the sort of they proclaim secularity but ऐसा तो है नहीं ना it is a pretty radical society at this point in time. This is a society that has seen Bengali Hindu genocide literally decades ago. तो ऐसा तो बदल तो गए नहीं है ना कोई बदलने की कोशिश हुई ऐसा नहीं कि उनका एजुकेशन बदला है या उनका एंटरटेनमेंट इंफॉर्मेशन सिस्टम कुछ भी बदला ऐसा कुछ नहीं हुआ है सो when this is the situation, these are the people she governs, she has to pick her battles. And her battles have been on the economic front more than anything else. So it's not that she is only that's not her job. To be a friend to India is not her job. Her job as the Prime Minister of Bangladesh is to manage Bangladesh. She's doing it best
हम्म,
as she can. And apart from the US, I don't see, apart from the US and probably some of their European and Western allies, I do not see any other nation across the world that ties in values and not national interest to foreign policy. So her foreign policy has been based on pragmatism. You know that China is not a reliable ally. It's not merely that as a trading partner they will not deliver or something. Look, when they start projects with the BRI, tell me how many they've promised across the countries and how many they have delivered on. They
absolutely
can
they have not been able to do that.
they can offer hope. Their own economic situation is horrible. So Bangladesh has sought a good balance. It's maintained very good relations. It has, at least administratively, proclaimed secularism. And if the alternative is someone else, then you know that the radicalization will be complete. We'll just have another Bangladesh on our borders. Sorry, another Pakistan on our borders. It was part of Pakistan anyway, so that's not too hard
I
to
anyway
imagine.
see them as I anyway see them as another Pakistan on the borders. Because
See,
the way
it's
they are
different
behaving, the way
right,
their society is going.
from a government perspective. It's different. मतलब है differences है. It's not just the cultural difference. The fact that uh, there is enough of civil society that acknowledges reality. It's not as brainwashed as Pakistan just because उनके textbooks पूरी तरह redo नहीं किए गए हैं. उनका एकदम एक cultural disconnect पूरी तरह हुआ नहीं है अभी तक के. So उसमें मतलब we have some hopes there. So there's that, and it is helpful to have someone like Sheikh Hasina not push for absolute radicalization at this point, right?
But do you think that going forward in Bangladesh, you will have some sort of opposition which will be more liberal than Sheikh Hasina? Because what I'm seeing the
No, I
trend
do
in
not think
Bangladesh,
that. I do not.
the
The
trend in
opposition is more
Bangladesh are,
radical than Sheikh Hasina.
yeah. So no, I'm saying going forward, somebody will emerge who will portray himself as a liberal or
That was
a
Muhammad
counter to
Yunus.
Sheikh Hasina. Or,
That was Muhammad Yunus.
so
That's a
then,
man who started a bank with two foreign women and is helping out Bangladeshi women. And see, the thing is, I would be more afraid of someone like them. They don't
hmm,
have the interest of the Bangladeshi citizens at heart. Somebody who can defraud their own, the poorest of the poor. I do not think that that's someone I would look to for succor. तो वो जो एक लिबरल रूप धारण करके एक रेडिकलाइजेशन फैलने देते हैं क्योंकि उन्होंने खुद ने कहा है वो उस सोसाइटी के अपेरेंट फ्रूट हैं राइट उन्होंने खुद ने कहा कि रेडिकलाइजेशन है नहीं वहां पे इट्स अ फ्रेंच फिनोमिनन वो तो बस फार राइट है एक फार राइट है क्या वो किस किस जहां में रहते हैं कि उनको ऐसा लगता है कि उस जगह पे रेडिकलाइजेशन इज हर दिन, मतलब लिटन दास जो कि वहाँ का प्रॉपर फेमस क्रिकेटर रहा है, उसको अटैक होता है, उसको बोलना पड़ता है क्योंकि उसने माँ दुर्गा को हाथ जोड़ लिया ना। तो मतलब it's
Something like
not,
what Danish Kaneria had to go through in Pakistan.
yes, but
Exactly
he's
like.
not everyone. Look, अभी भी जो हम लोग सोचते हैं, मतलब क्या ही बोले, we are now so much more aware of all of the atrocities that go on with Hindu girls in both the nations. We're so aware of every mandir being torn and desecrated, and all the sacrilege that is going on. The US has nothing now. I have gone through hundreds of articles that they write about Bangladesh. The points made against the nation is not that they are radical. Sometimes it feels like the point that is being made is that they're not radical enough. So they support the Rohingyas. The US press covers apparent atrocities against Rohingyas without ever naming a crime that the Rohingyas have committed against the Bangladeshi population. Without speaking of them and the narcotics trades that you mentioned, and through India as well.
And this thing baffles me at times. At times, I would say, not always, because I know the relationship between the Islamic terrorism and the Americans very well. But if you look at the charge today is the left Islamic kind of conundrum and the left Islamic, force which is uh, taking on the liberal democracies and taking on the liberalism of other places. Point is कि अगर चाइना ये चीजें करता है तो समझ आती है, क्योंकि चाइना सपोर्ट्स अ लॉट ऑफ सच एक्टिविटीज. चाइना को जो एक्सेस है पाकिस्तान के साथ, ईरान के साथ, टर्की के साथ, राइट. Americans are somebody who are actually fighting against it. अगर आप देखोगे इसराइल में भी अभी they are fighting against this axis. They are fighting against the axis they are fighting with Russia in Ukraine. Essentially the same axis. So how is it that the Americans are so blinded or blindsided by their own narrative that they cannot see what they are supporting and what they are not supporting? Or is it that the Americans are tacitly playing the Chinese game? Could that be a reason?
The thing is कि मैंने इसके बारे में आर्टिकल लिखा है जो कल छपना चाहिए. So hopefully it छप जाएगा. There's too much domestic politics that guides foreign policy in the US, ठीक है? And I'm sure, I mean, you know this, it's more for the viewers as well. The State Department is fractured. There is no coherence of thought. Israel में जो आप बोल रहे हैं, the only reason that the US government has not pivoted completely to pushing Israel for a ceasefire now, which it would have done for certain if Obama were in charge, is because of Biden. Biden only differs from Obama in this. He is not someone who will, decline his friendship and his duty towards Israel as its staunchest ally. And so the US government has not been able to push quite as hard to call for a ceasefire after October 7th. Because abhi shuru ho gaya unka. The State Department has started, pushing for an immediate ceasefire at this point, but it's taken a while, right? Which would not have been the case. ये क्या होता है कि अब जैसे कहीं पर भी जो ये एक कला ही कह सकते हैं, अब तक तो इतना पॉलिश हो चुका है कि कला से कम है नहीं. पहले एक अटैक होगा, उसमें सिविलियंस की हत्या होगी. जब सिविलियंस की हत्या होगी तो सिविल सोसाइटी उनके अगेंस्ट शोर करेगा, बट सिविल सोसाइटी इज गाइडेड बाय not up civil society is supported by the framework of the state, right? That's this framework of the state exists to support civil society.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so when the retaliation is due, अब जब साबरमती एक्सप्रेस के समय कुछ हुआ था, वहां पे तो गवर्नमेंट भी नहीं सपोर्ट करी थी, कुछ नहीं. तो व्हेन देयर इज अ रिटालिएशन, अब आप किसके अगेंस्ट कर रहे हैं बताइए. इफ यू आर गोइंग टू स्ट्राइक अगेंस्ट इजराइल, डू यू एक्सपेक्ट कि इजराइल का फुल फोर्स आपके अगेंस्ट नहीं आएगा, आएगा ना? मतलब
Yeah,
आप
absolutely. Yeah.
नेशन as a terrorist organization, you are attacking a nation. Now, this is exactly what India's, you know, response should have been towards so much of state-sponsored terrorism against India, right? I think
Mm.
Mumford, the former U.S. ambassador, what's his name? He just made a statement about not just about
He made a statement, and that statement made me think. If that is such a wonderful response, why was 9/11 then a different response from US? Why didn't they follow the same suit and said no response is a good response as well, right?
right.
And plunging the whole area or the whole geographical area into chaos for next 20 years.
Hmm.
Essentially, then giving power to those who they were fighting against for 20 years. So
तो
they
मैं वही जो कला है ना उनकी ऐसे है कि पहले वो अटैक करेंगे एंड इमीडिएटली जब अटैक खत्म हो जाएगा दे विल कॉल फॉर अ सीज फायर कि भाई खत्म करो, हम विक्टिम हैं. So the retaliation is stopped, and the US state is at this point complicit in allowing for that to happen. And at least pushing for that to happen. That hasn't happened. That's only on the state of Israel for not allowing for that to happen. The elements are there. It's like, "Abhi ke liye band karo, no, don't attack them. Let them attack you again." That's always the idea of it. If you're going to call for a ceasefire immediately after an attack on yourself, और हम ये गवर्नमेंट की बात करते थे. थिंग इज एट दिस पॉइंट हम लोग को पता है इसमें कौन से सिविलियंस के साथ क्या क्या हुआ है. सो यही चीज है. अब आप जो पूछ रहे हैं कि इज यूएस प्लेइंग द चाइना गेम, लुक, that is more than enough evidence at this point to suggest that parts of the State Department are incredibly compromised. There are think tanks that Abhi FBI ने finally, they've asked that general also, Robert, to they've not allowed him off scot-free, the guy who was essentially working for Qatar. है ना? आप important positions में रहकर US में, it's not the State Department. This man was of
Pentagon. He was working for the Iranians basically. There was a guy who was influencing the policy for Iran in Pentagon.
No.
Yes.
I'll just tell you his name. Yeah, Robert Menendez, right? So अब ठीक है, इसमें छोटी छोटी चीजें. Democrat senator. Sorry?
That's State Department, right?
So he's who are you talking about?
So there was another one who was in Pentagon and who was found of influencing the Iranian policy for the United States.
Iran has been running an influence operation. I wrote about this, I think. भूल जा रही हूँ कितने चीजें लिखे हैं, कौन से लिखने बाकी है. But yeah, I have written about influence operations. हाँ जी.
मैंने कहा, I remember you wrote about it. That is why I brought it up. I said the Iranian influence. If you remember the Iranian influence in Pentagon.
Iranian influence operations have been very effective. They've penetrated straight into the. So we cannot say with God जब तक के कोई अरेस्ट नहीं होता तब तक के हम कॉन्फिडेंस से बोल नहीं सकते कि चाइना के कौन से लोग हैं या कुछ है. But the thing is that parts of this, parts of the US State Department are compromised. We cannot, considering the mixed messaging, that has to play a role in it. If it were not, it would state very clearly how their decisions are for the benefit of the American public, right? Currently, the discourse is completely values based. कुछ भी शब्द का प्रयोग हो जाता है उनके लिए कि कभी backsliding of democracy, कभी autocracy, कभी कुछ. इसका कोई US के citizen से क्या संबंध रखता है उसका कोई मतलब नहीं है. Now the US State Department should also be working for citizen welfare using foreign policy as a pragmatic means of cementing national interest. National interest के लिए कैसे काम करता है? How is Bangladesh conducting an election, allowing for Sheikh Hasina to win? How is that a problem for American national interest? If
No,
they
I don't think that. Actually, what you're saying applies more is what is happening in Pakistan right now, where there are rejections of more than 600 PTI workers. The PTI election symbol has been taken away by the courts. Any other opposition which is coming, they are just dismantling them, and they're preparing ground only for one party. That one party should wait, win the election, irrespective 10 vote pade ya 10,000 vote pade, usse farak nahi padta. So I think what they're writing for Bangladesh, if they write for Pakistan, it makes a lot of sense.
वो
And
अपने
they come
प्रेसिडेंट को
across as
जेल में
honest
डालें,
people.
वो अपने ही प्रेसिडेंट को जेल में डालें, पाकिस्तान को तो
Huh.
हेल्प करेंगे ही। तो
Right. And then
मतलब
their own democracy, if you talk about, and their own usage of force. If you look at Trump, especially what they're doing with Trump, or what they have done with Republic, also even 6th of January का जो वो protest है, उसके आड़ में इन्होंने protesters के साथ क्या किया? They have locked them up in terrorism cases, some for life as well, right? So the same argument can be made for them as well. But unfortunately, the problem is that they get away from all of this and all this scrutiny from the rest of the world and rest of the world's media, but their media is so penetrative of everywhere else that they get to question everyone while they walk scot-free. मैं इसको ऐसे देखता हूँ, right?
I disagree with you that I have a fundamental disagreement with the fact that media has penetrated everywhere. It is a very small section of elite English speaking Indians who amplify their narrative. It does not, it reaches on the ground only when the BBC starts a Hindi language channel. ये जो हम लोग बात करते हैं ना, हम भी उस elite category में आते हैं जो ट्विटर पर समय निकाल सकते हैं. अगर हम नहीं करते तो हमें भी ये अफेक्ट नहीं करता.
हाँ, but इनका
देश
mechanism ऐसा है ना कि
देश
they
की
will
जनता
start something there.
को इलेक्ट्रिसिटी मिल रहा है, रास्ते बन रहे हैं उनके लिए, गैस सिलेंडर मिल रहा है, आवास योजना में है, आयुष्मान योजना में है, आयुष्मान भारत, ये सब दिख रहा है उनकी आंखों के सामने, तो वो एक्सपीरियंस आप उनसे छीन नहीं सकते हैं. वो इस ये उनकी मत है, वो उस बेसिस पे वोट करते हैं. राम 500 साल बाद अपने घर विराजमान फिर हो रहे हैं. तो अब आप उसमें एक देश हित के लिए क्या हो रहा है, देशवासियों को बिल्कुल अच्छे से पता है. जो उनका नैरेटिव है, ये मैं बार-बार कहूँगी, ये लोग बहुत कन्फ्यूज़ करते हैं कि ना ट्विटर पे बहुत ज़्यादा डिस्कशन होता है. ये आपकी बात नहीं कर रही हूँ, ये मोस्टली ये बहुत सारे there's a foreign policy commentator who loves picking on Indian audiences and is based out of a famous US think tank. She keeps citing these Indians कि हाँ भाई Indians ऐसे. Indians को कोई मतलब नहीं है. Indians जो on the ground है, उनको कोई मतलब नहीं है. They cater to their audience. They have, look, what it does is it creates a sort of implicit approval for any sort of action and intervention that the US might take at a later point. जब इराक पे जब उन्होंने हमला किया था, तब उसके पहले क्या न्यूज़ आ रहा था इराक के बारे में? गल्फ वॉर में जब घुसे वो, तब वो Naira testimony was incredibly important, where she spoke about the babies being taken out of their incubators in Kuwait, right? Kuwaiti media ने proper वो बताया था कि Iraqi soldiers आए, ये वो किया, पता चला कि वो fake news है. She was coached by Hill and Knowlton, a PR company. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the US. इतना obvious connection था, right? मतलब seriously, so itna obvious connection tha. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the US. Uski testimony, and she was coached very well. It's heartrending to see a child, and this is part of good propaganda mechanism, to use a child, to use women. Now you're using a female child, so it ties both of those things together. You're using that emotional rhetoric. It has been templatized to a point where they don't need to work on it. अब वो किसी को भी बोलते हैं कि सुनो, एक वहां से आदिवासी महिला लाना एक टोकनिस्टिक चीज होता है. कौन सच बोल रहा है वो उनके आइडेंटिटी पर निर्भर है, कि एक महिला है, एक बच्ची है, एक मुस्लिम महिला है, एक कुछ भी. अब तो सौंदरराजन को आप बोल रहे हैं कि वो दलित हैं. यार कम ऑन, मतलब कुछ भी वो बस उनके ऑडियंस को पता नहीं है, ठीक है? उनके ऑडियंस को कोई डायनामिक्स नहीं पता है, कोई सच्चाई नहीं पता है. या उनके ऑडियंस के लिए है कि उनके रीडर्स की इग्नोरेंस पर निर्भर है कि उनको कुछ पता नहीं है, उनको ये सुना दो देश के बारे में, बांग्लादेश के बारे में बता दो कि शेख हसीना बहुत ऑटोक्रेटिक है। आप बार बार यही पढ़ेंगे। आप अभी एक सर्च कीजिए गूगल पर, शेख हसीना ऑटोक्रेटिक। Look at the number of Reuters, AP, NPR, MSN, sorry, not NPR, probably NPR,
Even European
MSN,
Parliament.
how many of those articles come out about,
Yeah,
right?
and apart from
So,
that, even European Union and
I
European Parliament
I
have been very
studied
critical.
so many of the European language. मैं अभी उनसे ही बात करी थी महेश से कि जर्मन में भी क्या बातें होती है इंडिया के बारे में और बांग्लादेश के बारे में या सब कॉन्टिनेंट के बारे में, वो भी डिस्कस होनी चाहिए। और it's very important to learn their language and speak to them in their language to tell them what they're missing out on, to offer a
Hmm.
perspective that is more global and not purely Western in perspective. So ये चीजें हैं कि आप जो कह रहे हैं ना, मुझे बस इससे डिसएग्रीमेंट है कि their narrative does not matter. Now, in a true democracy, it does not matter. Does it matter if they are about to actually create an intervention in Bangladesh? Then it will matter. Look at all of the media that was created before in the Balkans when actual
Hmm.
Balkanization happened.
They should happen. Yes, in Yugoslavia, the way they went about.
So this is a narrative that suits अब जो अगर यूएस ऐसे वॉर्स में पार्टिसिपेट करने लगेगी तो उनके खुद के सिटीजन्स को लगेगा कि यार क्यों उतने दूर के देश में हमसे क्या मतलब है, तो उनको पहले से प्राइम करके रखते हैं कि
Hmm.
ये ऑटोक्रेटिक लीडर्स हैं, वो अपने सिविलियंस पे बहुत जाति कर रहे थे, उन एकदम डेंजरस हैं, दे आर डेंजरस टू वर्ल्ड पीस, इसलिए वी विल कॉज वॉर। सब जगह वर्ल्ड पीस में का मतलब ओबामा won the Nobel Peace Prize while bombing, not while, 2 years after which he was bombing 7 Muslim nations, right? Continued bombing 7
Yeah.
nations in West Asia. So
Between George Senior Bush to Obama, they have killed 22 million people among themselves, these presidents of United States of America, right?
correct.
But एक और चीज है सागरिका इसमें, which is very interesting, I'll tell you. You know, if you look at now the way they have been able to, जिस narrative की आप बात कर रहे हो कि ये build करते हैं कि war करनी है, आज की डेट में अगर आप देखोगे वो narrative इनको उल्टा इसलिए पड़ गया क्योंकि आज की डेट में अगर आप देखोगे कि इवन ओसामा बिन लादेन को अमेरिकन्स ने sort of accept करना शुरू कर दिया कि नहीं, वो उसके पीछे तो एक context था, he's somebody who had a context, so he was not wrong. So ये जो इनका ये जो narrative है, I think कहीं ना कहीं they have not realized कि it is now working against them. And everybody is now very easily using the same kind of narrative against them. तो कहीं ना कहीं वो recognition भी नहीं है क्योंकि the Americans were taken off guard the moment वो TikTok videos आए जहां पर Obama Osama bin Laden was being celebrated and was said he's not a terrorist. He's somebody who had a context behind him, and I think that is where now they will essentially will have to rethink about how to build narratives, because in the long run, these narratives are going to come back and haunt them even more than what they are going to haunt a person sitting in India or in Bangladesh.
Why is it working against them? Why would you? My question is because they propagate this narrative themselves. I think you think of the US as a coherent nation. They don't think of themselves like
Nation, but
क्यों मैं
building this
पूछती
narrative that Osama bin Laden was a terrorist and we had to fight and they fought essentially 20 years. To coming to back to square one where the population have now started questioning, was Osama bin Laden even a terrorist? So what kind of a narrative were you able to build for those years and all over those 20 years during the war that, essentially just a decade later, it's being questioned all over by the Americans?
not the only thing. It's not coming back to bite them or anything. There's a lot of people in institutions that are not against this narrative. It's the only reason that it's coming forth. Their idealisms, their ideologies change rapidly. And look, I'm not against that because as our understanding of situations and of people, of society changes, and it does over decades, it does. There are points of change. But now we've gone from McCarthyism, which punished anyone remotely suspected of communism. Like remotely
Hmm.
suspected. You're a student studying liberal arts, you're probably communist, we'll put you in jail. That was the thing. This is the government, there is actual evidence of government interference pushing Marxist ideologies. Now, whether it calls it that openly or presents it as DEI is different, but it's the same institutions, right? अब जब मैकार्थीज्म से कम्युनिज्म, BLM की जो प्रोटेस्टर थे उसने रेड बुक लिया और कहा कि मतलब this is the manifesto, the communist manifesto is what I
Yeah.
aspire to. So if you can switch that drastically within a few decades, so this is also, it's all a part of the same machinery. So मुझे नहीं लगता है कि किसी को हार्म एज सच हो रहा है जब इन्होंने जिहाद को प्रॉपरली सपोर्ट करने लग गए टू फुलफिल सम शॉर्ट टर्म गोल्स, तब ये होना कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है ना. दैट वॉर, if they wanted to, if they actually had a war against terrorism, this is likely not how it would go, right? Why all of the attackers they were not based in Iraq. There were probably there was one guy, I think, from Iraq. Iraq mein kyun? So
There was
it's all,
nobody in Iraq.
so
Iraq
this
में
is
तो कोई नहीं था, they were all in Afghanistan.
so this is job narrative create karna hai for a short term goal they create. That's the problem with these narratives. They're way too short term, and when it's short term, it does not tie into national interest, and that's something that their citizens should begin to question. I think it is happening slowly because national interest is not narratives are necessary. I don't mean propaganda, I mean every reality can be tied to something that is pragmatically beneficial for a nation as a whole, for the survival of a society. The idea that a faraway government of Sheikh Hasina, who is posing no military threat whatsoever to the US, needs to be ousted just
On
because.
the on the on the contrary, the Bangladeshi forces are a part of every UN mission which is out there, in different regions and different countries. Bangladeshis are contributing their armed forces towards the UN, right? They're not a threat. They're trying to be allies of the UN. So even if you look at, जब हम कहते हैं कि democracy खतरे में है, Bangladesh में, she has taken some very good steps when it comes to, making democracy more robust in Bangladesh. For example, if you look at the election commission, the way she has set up the election commission, the way they're allowed to monitor the election, the way the foreign observers are allowed to come into Bangladesh and observe the elections, how elections are going to go. So that these are symbols of a leader who is confident of a democracy of a country, confident of her own government, that they can hold the institutions fairly democratic. But despite all this, when you see this tirade coming from these Western countries, it makes you wonder that what exactly is that they want to achieve, and how detrimental it is for the people of that country, for the people who are the neighbor of that country, to allow that kind of interference coming from these Western countries. They essentially destroyed Middle East on the same basis. Look at what they did in Libya. Look at what they did in Iraq. They completely destroyed the whole thing, and it's going to take years to rebuild that. And terrorism fostered because of those reasons in Iraq, especially what they did in Iraq. So are they trying to do something in Bangladesh where they want to keep Pakistan ka to, kahin na kahin jo terrorism life hai wo itni expose ho gayi hai ki everything is Pakistan. Let's create another Pakistan in Bangladesh to play our regional games in Asia.
And look, Pakistan is a very synthetic country. It has no identity of its own. Its representative is the fact that they are anti-India, they wanted a separate
So
country.
Do they want to create another Pakistan? Do they want to create a Pakistan on the side?
Examples of Libya and Iraq that you've mentioned have required US military intervention. I don't believe that is what they're seeking here. However, the US has been rather successful in installing puppet governments for some time. This is my thing with the short-term narratives. I would urge the audience कि आप जाके एक बार बोरिस येल्टसिन का गवर्नमेंट चेकआउट कीजिए. जब यूएसएसआर ब्रेकअप हुआ तब जो डेमोक्रेसी बोल के एक बोरिस येल्टसिन को डाला, तब क्या हुआ रशिया में? The way the country suffered, the way that economy collapsed, the way that institutions were completely infested with, चलिए स्पाइस तो पहले से थे, but the economic problems that happen, it's not like it will not get better without immense immense vision and work, right? But अब इशू ये है कि यहाँ पे सक्सीड हुआ है। दूसरा एक और एग्जांपल ले लीजिए, जब शाह को इंस्टॉल किया गया ईरान में, है ना? तो तब जब शाह को इंस्टॉल किया गया ईरान में, जो ऑपोजिशन था वो प्योरली ऑर्गेनिक था। जो मुस्लिम रेडिकल ऑपोजिशन था, चलिए उन्होंने कम्युनिस्ट के साथ काम किया एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट, एवरीबडी वाज अगेंस्ट द पपेट गवर्नमेंट। नो सिटीजन वांट्स अ करप्ट टोकनिस्टिक लीडर इन चार्ज, दैट इज जस्ट बिकॉज कि हाँ गोरे लोगों ने बोला है या अमेरिकन ने बोला है। यू नो, नो सिटीजनरी वांट्स अ पपेट लीडर that is absolutely corrupt, because a puppet leader is corrupt. That their point is to do what their masters are saying, and the masters are not the citizen. Obviously, that is how a democracy works. A democracy means that the citizen elects its leader. A puppet regime works with the strings being pulled from elsewhere, and the citizenry will be affected. And if the citizenry oust such a government, they will. But in the meantime, it causes immense pain to the country, to the population. These people have children, they have names, they have, wives that will be raped, they have men who will be butchered. And we keep seeing this happen again and again. This is not the kind of intervention that is expected from the watchdog of democracy, because democracy must be accepted as the citizens' will. एंड वही नहीं कर रहे हैं। अब उनको एक लीडर पसंद है जो आपको नहीं पसंद, भाई उनको पसंद है, डेमोक्रेसी का पॉइंट ही है। हमको अगर ट्रूडो नहीं पसंद है तो हम क्या वहां पे जाके कोई दंगे फसाद करवाएंगे कि हमें ट्रूडो नहीं पसंद है, हटाओ इसको? हम नहीं करेंगे ना, क्योंकि उनके गवर्नमेंट, उनकी चॉइस है, वो उनकी इकोनॉमी डूब रही है, वो झेलेंगे यार, फिर उनको अक्ल आएगी। इट्स अ ब्लडलेस मीन्स ऑफ चेंजिंग पावर। दैट्स द पॉइंट ऑफ अ डेमोक्रेसी कि हाँ कोई आके राजा का वध कर रहा है, उसका बेटा या कोई दूर से आके, वो हम उस पीढ़ी में नहीं जीना चाहते हैं, इसलिए डेमोक्रेसी अपनाए हैं। तो अब यूएस ही उसे अगर रिस्पेक्ट ना करे और चाहें कि पपेट गवर्नमेंट आएगी, हम जो बोलेंगे वो करेगी, हम हमारे लिए फायदा। अब ये फायदा अगर अमेरिकन सिटीजन्स को जाता ना तो भी समझ आता, अमेरिकन सिटीजन्स को आज तक के कोई फायदा नहीं हुआ है उनसे। आप देखिए वियतनाम वॉर में 168 बिलियन उस समय, उसके बाद 22 बिलियन is still going to US war Vietnam war veterans and their families to this date. Or there are, I think there's about 100 billion more that has been recurring costs after the war.
3 trillion they lost in Afghanistan.
Ukraine में देखिए war by proxy में कितना losses. Well, it's the taxpayer now. Because the US has been the world's, has had control of the world's reserve currency, it could get away with printing more money and high inflation. De-dollarization will not affect that to a very large extent at this point. It is a process, but उनका सबसे ज्यादा डेट है अभी, ट्रिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर्स के डेट में है, और टैक्स बढ़े जा रही है। टैक्स कौन पे कर रहा है? सिटीजन। ये जहाँ किसके जेब में रहा है पैसा, आप घुमा फिरा के देखेंगे तो आपको उत्तर मिल जाएगा कि क्यों कर रहे हैं। बट द थिंग इज कि for us as a functional democracy, we do not expect this kind of dysfunction from a state institution, but they are propagating it, and we're audiences, spectators to, with a ringside view.
Yeah, so, if I had to wrap it up, this is how I would wrap it up. I would say that in today's age, people, whether they come from poor nations or they come from rich nations, they are far more astute, far more aware of what is happening on the ground. उनकी सेंस जो है वो बेटर होती है, उनकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग जो है वो बेटर होती है, एज अपोज टू द अमेरिकन्स जिनकी जियोपॉलिटिकल सेंस बहुत कम है। They have more ignorance towards the world than more information seeking around the world. So I think जो हम resistance देख रहे हैं, चाहे and of self awareness देख रहे हैं, चाहे इंडिया में देख रहे हैं, चाहे बांग्लादेश में देख रहे हैं, I think any thriving democracy will behave the way the Bangladeshi Prime Minister is behaving, will behave we are behaving. The only country which is a limited, a sham democracy or a dictatorial democracy, what Mahesh Bhai says to Pakistan, is something who will succumb to the pressure, right? And I think it's good for the Western powers to understand the difference, that the ground is changing. They need to smell the coffee. That it is not the same Asia, it is not the same Southeast Asia, which was about 2 decades ago. It's a very changed, it's a very assertive, it's a very confident Southeast Asia which is emerging, and I think they need to respect that. I think that recognition has to come, right?
वो है, and just because the topic is pertinent to Muhammad Yunus, I will just want to say कि जो look, any person, regardless of whether he's won 5, 6 awards, and he has won a lot of awards, right? This is a person who has won the Nobel Peace Prize. He's the only Bangladeshi winner of the Nobel Prize. He has won the United States Presidential Medal of Freedom. He's won the Congressional Gold Medal. Now you have to wonder, he's also won a Magsaysay Award, I think. Now you have to wonder, this person who's winning US awards, he's being recognized by a foreign nation. How exactly has he contributed to that foreign nation? Now, when the documentary that I was talking about, it was why Norway got interested is because the Grameen phone, which was one of the things that also he started, was partnered with Telenor. It's a Norwegian telecom company, but there's a lot more Norwegian interests in his work, actually. But this journalist discovered that he was taking millions of dollars, which is 100 million in US aid almost. Okay, he got you. अब एक काम कीजिए मुनीब, हम सोचे हैं थिंक टैंक के बारे में, राइट? ठीक है, हम थिंक टैंक शुरू किए हैं, और थिंक टैंक के बदले हम उसे एनजीओ बना लेते हैं। हम दोनों शुरू करते हैं एनजीओ। हम बोलते हैं कि हम मंदिर में सेवा करेंगे और डीरेडिकलाइजेशन करेंगे, और हमारे पास ये रिसीट्स हैं कि आप इतने सारे वर्कशॉप्स कंडक्ट किए हैं कश्मीर में, और मैं इतना सारा सेवा करवाई हूँ मंदिर में, है ना? ये सारा हम काम करवाएंगे। बट देन जिनसे भी आप फंड्स लिए हैं, गवर्नमेंट ने हमें फंड्स दिए हैं, नॉर्वे से फंड्स आए हैं, यूएस से फंड्स आए हैं, $100 million worth of funds was diverted by Muhammad Yunus to his aides, to his closest aides. This is not a man who's helping.
Reminds me of a so-called journalist of India who went out in COVID, doing funds. You know who I'm talking about, right? And then using those public funds for putting an FD to her father's account and doing that. A modus operandi of all these people, who are connected with US, and how they operate, and how they use the money for their own gain rather than genuinely being out there and being genuine towards their cause. Sad to see people sitting in your country, trying to sabotage your own country for few dollars or few, pennies. So it's a very sad thing.
The thing is कि इसके ऐसे काम करते हुए भी ना आप 10 सक्सेस स्टोरीज निकाल लेंगे ना। अब 100 मिलियन में से अगर दिन में 10 परिवारों को खाना खिला रहे हैं, और आप पूरे ड्यूरेशन में अगर 10 लोगों का सक्सेस स्टोरी डीरेडिकलाइजेशन का दिखा रहे हैं, वो सक्सेस स्टोरी आप पेश कर सकते हैं। अब ऐसी प्रस्तुति उन लोगों को की जाएगी जो आपके डोनर्स हैं, ताकि वो और पैसा दें। It's very easy, right? The thing is that when it comes to charities, a lot of people have no understanding of social situations and cultural realities in different countries, especially when they're coming from the West. Charity is not a seva bhav. Seva bhav does not come from wanting to do good for other people. It comes from wanting to better ourselves, from needing to better society around us, because ultimately it is a selfish motive. हम अपने लिए करते हैं कि मतलब हमारे आसपास सब, because ये करना है. You see a hungry person, it's not normal to not help them out. That's सेवा भाव.
It's a human instinct. It's a very normal thing.
It's more of a repentance thing कि हाँ हमारे पास बहुत है, इनको कुछ दे देते. They don't need to get that involved. तो वो भेज देते पैसा. अब ऐसे लोगों से पैसा लेना इजी है ना, जो स्कैमस्टर्स हैं वो बार-बार पैसे लेंगे. Now I'm not calling him a scamster. Look, there's some legitimate things that he's worked on, but is he part of an agenda? So we can't take that at face value कि हाँ ये लोग बोल रहे हैं कि he's above reproach. Why? Why is a person above reproach? आप तो मतलब हमारे देश के भगवानों को आप reproach से ऊपर नहीं रखते हैं, तो आप एक इंसान को कैसे कह सकते हैं कि वो legal investigation से भी परे रहे?
Nobody is above law. Nobody is above law. Is Trump above law because he was the ex-president of USA? No, right? It's the same law they're using against him, barring him from elections. In
No,
any
he's not.
civilized country, nobody
It's,
is above law.
it's unconstitutional actually. What that it will be
Only in,
challenged. It's not a law.
only in quasi states. खाली quasi states में आपको law आप above law होते हो. Something like Afghanistan, something like Pakistan, you are above law because it depends on what power and what money you have. You can buy everybody out. But in any state, any decent state, nobody is above law. Can never be above.
This is
That means your
argument
country is not.
very often made, right? कि मतलब कोई भी अगर investigation के अंदर आए, they call it an attack on democracy. How is a democratic state enacting its own laws going against democracy unless the meaning of democracy has changed and we haven't received the memo? So ये एक चीज है मुझे, because the topic was mostly about Mohammed Yunus. I wanted to address that look, this man has come under the scanner, not a Bangladeshi scanner, it's a Norwegian scanner. It is something that has been discussed in the Norwegian parliament in 1998. तो अभी की बात है नहीं, वो बहुत पहले से he's been under observation, and his businesses have, and उनको कोई punishment hardly कुछ मिला है. He's been granted bail immediately, and they still have appeals left in the higher court. और उनको फाइन क्या मिला है? $227. $227 का फाइन है. तो मतलब एक हवा मचाना है, मचा देंगे, वो बस क्यों कर रहे हैं? And I'll tell you why. My suspicion, and I discussed this with Mahesh offline, is that look, it's a very small little means of showing the middle finger to the US. Because you can harangue, the harassment is ongoing since quite a while. मतलब 1.5 साल से तो बहुत ज्यादा प्रेशर डाला है. अब इलेक्शन आ रहे हैं. If someone cared about democracy, they'd ensure free and fair elections. They're not. They're mobilizing an entire media arm to treat to essentially allow and offer sort of legitimacy for any violent protests that may erupt there. आपने वेस्ट बंगाल का कवरेज देखा था पोस्ट इलेक्शन वायलेंस का? कोई भी वेस्टर्न मीडिया में देखा था?
नहीं किया, किसी ने नहीं किया. There was no
coverage है, तो we should from a Bangladeshi perspective it should be ignored. It cannot be taken seriously. I think Western media has been called out for their falsehoods enough. But it is the audience that needs to be aware. Unfortunately, we aren't talking to them yet. So I hope कि हम मतलब कभी हमारी reach बढ़े. इसलिए मतलब मैं articles लिखती हूँ तो मुझे कभी-कभी ऐसा नहीं है कि वो पढ़ने वाले उनकी ऑडियंस थी, बट हाँ अमेरिकन्स हैं जो पढ़ते हैं अभी, बिकॉज इंडिया हैज अ पोजीशन एंड we have a voice, we speak their language, we are able to communicate our views and values. We should also be talking to them just so that they are not so uninformed of, we can't live without each other. It is a world that is connected. So ऐसा इतना नहीं हो सकता है कि हाँ हमारी जमी हुई है. At some point there's a lot of value to be gained from our relationship with the US, our relationship with the world, and we should be trying to talk to them. तो वो है, उनकी ऑडियंस नहीं सुनेगी अभी, बट हमारी ऑडियंस को इतना we should be concerned that Sheikh Hasina is concerned about regime change and keep that in mind.
Their audience might not be listening, but they're certainly taking interest. Given the interaction on social media, we see what happens.
We should leverage that. We should use that.
Yeah. And we are leveraging that and to our advantage also. We are making them see the other side of the coin. With that note, Sagarika, thank you very much for tonight. And this was a lovely conversation. And I hope we'll join each other again and we'll have some conversations, stimulating ones on different topics happening around the globe. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Yes.